Today is Monday. It's March 30th, 2020. It's Donato and Mrs. Fuoco. And today I'm going to read you Mr. Peabody's Apples by Madonna. I noticed that in this book, it used the word admire. And this was a vocabulary word from one of the previous books that we read. Do you remember which one? Okay, my vocab words for this book today are judge, to form an opinion or an estimate. Thank you, Donato. Remain, to continue in the same state, continue to be as specified. So right now we are staying or remaining at home. What else can we find? We also have amazed, greatly surprised, astounded, or suddenly filled with wonder. Amazed. This man is amazed. Amazed. And the last word is relieved. He's relieved. It's to ease or alleviate pain, distress, anxiety, need, etc. You gotta be respectful to the books, buddy. All right, Mr. Peabody's Apples is published by Calloway in New York, New York. And Madonna wrote, this book is dedicated to teachers everywhere. What do you see? What do you see in this picture? This title page shows Mr. Peabody and Billy Little. The art is by Loren Long. Loren Long is the illustrator. And this was published in 2003. This is a water tower that says, "Welcome to Hapville." And you could see baseball players in the distance and a red apple tree on the hill. Really nice illustrations. Expressionistic. Mr. Peabody congratulates his Little League team on a great game in this photo here. Well, it's not a photo, it's a drawing. So, because it's a drawing, we can already predict that this is a fictional book. But at the end, Madonna does say that she hopes she did this story justice. In the town of Hapville, which wasn't a very big town, Mr. Peabody was congratulating his Little League team on a great game. They had not won, but no one really cared because they had such a good time playing. Mr. Peabody was the history teacher at the local elementary school, and in the summertime, he dedicated every Saturday to organizing baseball games with other schools. Billy Little, who wasn't a very big boy, was one of Mr. Peabody's students. He loved baseball more than anything, and he thought Mr. Peabody was the greatest. After each game, he would always stay to help pick up all the bats and balls. And when they were finished, Mr. Peabody would smile and say, "Thanks, Billy. Good job. I'll see you next Saturday." Then he would start his walk home along the main street of Hapville, which wasn't a very big street, waving hello to everyone he knew, and everyone would wave hello back. Along the way, he always passed Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market. Here, Mr. Peabody would stop and admire Mr. Funkadeli's fresh apples. He would pick out the shiniest apple, drop it in his bag, and continue on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom watched with curiosity as Mr. Peabody walked away with the apple. "That's strange," Tommy said to himself. "Mr. Peabody didn't pay anyone for the apple." Tommy got on his skateboard and rushed to tell his friends. This is Mr. Peabody picks the shiniest apple. Tommy and his friends are amazed at what they see. The following Saturday, Mr. Peabody's team played another game and they lost as usual. But no one seemed to care because they'd had such a good time playing. Billy picked up the balls and bats, and Mr. Peabody sat off on his walk home. He waved to everyone he knew, and they waved back. Once again, he stopped outside Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market, picked up the shiniest apple, dropped it in his bag, and continued on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends watched Mr. Peabody, and they were amazed at what they saw. Mr. Peabody had not paid for his apple. They couldn't wait to tell all of their friends, who told their parents, who told their neighbors, who told their friends in the town of Hatfield, which wasn't a very big town. The Saturday after that, Mr. Peabody was standing all alone on the baseball field, wondering where everyone was. Then he saw Billy walking toward him with a sad look on his face. "Hello, Billy, I'm glad you're here, but where's the rest of the team?" asked Mr. Peabody. Billy remained silent. What is it, Billy?" he asked again. Billy didn't look up. "Everybody thinks you're a thief," he said to the ground. Mr. Peabody looked confused. He took off his hat and scratched his head. "Who says I'm a thief, Billy? And what did I steal?" he asked. "Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends said they saw you take an apple from Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market twice, and they said you didn't pay for them," answered Billy. "Ah," said Mr. Peabody, putting his hat back on his head. "Let's go and talk to Mr. Funkadeli about it, shall we?" Mr. Peabody wonders where everybody is in this illustration. Everybody thinks you're a thief. They walked down the main street, which wasn't a very big street, and Mr. Peabody waved to all the people he knew, but now some of them did not wave back, and some pretended they did not even see him. They finally arrived at Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market. Out popped Mr. Funkadeli, who said, "Hey, what are you doing here, Mr. Peabody? Why aren't you at the game?" "There wasn't a game today," said Mr. Peabody, "and I was wondering if I could take my apple earlier than usual." "Sure, why not?" replied Mr. Funkadeli. "You pay for them every Saturday morning when you pick up your milk. You can take them when you like. You want the big shiny one, Mr. Peabody?" Mr. Peabody took his apple, smiled, and offered it to Billy. In this one it says Mr. Peabody offers Billy the apple. What's that look on his face? "I would like to take the apple, Mr. Peabody, but I have to go to find Tommy and explain everything," said Billy. "When you find him, ask him to come over to my house. I would like to speak to him too," replied Mr. Peabody. A little while later, Billy found Tommy and told him what had happened with the apples. He told Tommy that Mr. Peabody wanted to speak to him right away. So off Tommy ran, and when he arrived, he rang the doorbell, and Mr. Peabody came to the door. They looked at each other for a while. This is when he rings the doorbell. "Oh dear, Mr. Peabody," said Tommy on the doorstep. "I didn't understand. I should not have said what I said." "Thank you." "But it looked like you hadn't paid for the apples." Mr. Peabody's eyebrows went up a little, and he felt a warm breeze blow across his face. "Doesn't matter what it looked like. What matters is the truth." Tommy looked down at his shoes and said, "I'm so sorry. What can I do to make things better now?" Mr. Peabody took a deep breath, looked up at a small cloud that was in the sky and said, "I'll tell you what, Tommy. Meet me at the baseball diamond in 1 hour and bring a pillow stuffed with feathers." "Okay," said Tommy, who then ran off to his house to get a pillow. An hour later, Tommy met Mr. Peabody on the pitcher's mound. "Hello, Tommy," said Mr. Peabody. "Follow me and bring your pillow." Tommy followed Mr. Peabody to the top of the bleachers, wondering what this was all about. "It's a windy day, isn't it?" "Windy, thank you." asked Mr. Peabody. When they reached the top, Tommy nodded his head in agreement. Here's a pair of scissors. Now cut the pillow in half and shake the feathers out. Tommy looked confused, but he did it anyway. He thought it was a small price to pay to gain Mr. Peabody's forgiveness. The wind carried the thousands of feathers far and wide. Each feather represents a person in Hapville. Tommy looked relieved and said, "Is that all I have to do to make things better?" "There is one more thing," said Mr. Peabody. "Now you must go and pick up all the feathers." Tommy frowned. "I don't think it's possible to pick up all the feathers," Tommy replied. "It would be just as impossible to undo the damage that you have done by spreading the rumor that I am a thief," said Mr. Peabody. "Each feather represents a person in Hapville." There was a long pause as Tommy began to understand what Mr. Peabody was saying. Finally, he said, "I guess I have a lot of work ahead of me." Mr. Peabody smiled and said, "Indeed you do. Next time, don't be so quick to judge a person, and remember the power of your words." Then he handed Tommy the shiny red apple and made his way home. The end. Aha, I'm going to read the end part, dedicated to teachers everywhere. This book was inspired by a nearly 300-year-old story that was told to me by my Kabbalah teacher. It stayed with me for a long time, and when I began to write books for children, I decided to share the essence of the story in one of them. It is about the power of words and how we must choose them carefully to avoid causing harm to others. The Baal Shem Tov, master of the good name, who was the author of the original story, was also a great teacher. He was born in 1700 in Podolia, a region of the Ukraine, and dedicated his life to teaching and helping others. Among his many teachings, he stressed the value and importance of love for all people. I hope that I have done this story justice. So, is it nonfiction? It talks about Madonna. Madonna Ritchie was born in Bay City, Michigan. She has recorded 16 albums and appears in 18 movies, including A League of Their Own. Great movie. She lives with her husband, movie director Guy Ritchie, and her 2 children, Lola and Rocco, in London and Los Angeles. This was written in 2003, remember. Her first children's book, The English Roses, was released in more than 100 countries around the world in September 2003. So she was the author. Now about the illustrator, Loren lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, with his wife, Loren, Tracy, and 2 sons, Griffith and Graham. He has taught illustration, and his work has been featured in numerous publications, including Sports Illustrated and Time magazine. An avid baseball fan, he played on a vintage team for many years. Okay, my comprehension questions. The first one is, who is Billy Little? And it's okay, you can go back and listen to this story again. And then answer the comprehension questions. And bonus points if you write down the answers and send them to your teacher. Why did Tommy run off to see his friends? What was he going to tell them? You remember? Next is, what do you think the moral of this story is? What's the big picture? What's the lesson that it's trying to teach you? What's the moral of the story? And can you make a text to self-connection? Have you ever been quick to judge someone? I think we all have. But it's just good to be aware, not to judge a book by its cover. Right? All right, that's it, friends. See you tomorrow. Thank you.